Hello, this is Lucas, and in this video I'm going to be going over for loops in JavaScript. So in the last video I went over while and do while loops, so if you haven't seen that video, check it out. But for loops are just another way that we can loop through a piece of code a number of times. Okay, so let's create our for loop, shall we? So the way we'll do this is we'll do for. Now in brackets, there's a few steps that we need for a for loop to work. The first one is the start or the begin. Okay, so let's just do a let I is equal to 0. Okay, this is the very start of our loop. Okay, and then next we need a condition. So let's say we do I is less than 10. Okay, so what's going to happen here is we are going to start off with I being 0, and the condition for the loop to continue to run is this. This has to be true in order for the for loop to run. If this becomes false, then we will exit out of the for loop. Then the very last part that we need, or the third part that we need, is the step. And this gets executed after the code is run. So we can do something like I++. Okay? And then the very last part is, inside the curly brackets, this is our body. This is the code that gets executed per iteration. So we can have something basic like console.log. Okay? And in here we can just print out I. Okay, so let's see the output that we get. So if I refresh this, you can see over here we get 0 all the way to 9. Okay, because the way it works is, well, firstly, let's start off at the start, which is the begin. So firstly we set I, which is equal to 0. Then we check if this condition is true. Now I is 0, so 0 is less than 10, so we will execute this piece of code in here. Okay. Once the code is finished executing, we will then run this step. Alright, we will just increment I by 1. And then we don't need this any longer. Alright, we only need this at the very start of our for loop. So then in our second iteration, we will skip this and we will just look at the condition. Now if the condition is true, we will execute the block of code again. And then once the block of code is executed, we will go back to the step and we will iterate it one more time. And we will continue to do this until this iteration is false. And you can see once we reach 9, okay, we print out 9, we iterate 9 by 1, so it becomes 10. And then we check if this condition is true, which is false, because 10 is not less than 10. So then we will exit out of the for loop and the for loop will no longer continue. Now we can actually skip a few of these parts. So you can see we need three parts here. Right? There's 3 sections in order for a for loop to work. Now we can actually skip a few of these. Well, we don't actually skip them entirely, but we don't actually have to include them inside of the for loop. Okay, so what we can do is outside of this for loop, we can have a variable called I. We can equal this to 0, and then because we have I is equal to 0, we no longer need this anymore, so we can actually remove this, but we need to leave this semicolon here. Okay, and now we can save this, go back to our code, refresh this, and you can see we still get 0 to 9. Right? So we don't actually have to include the start or the begin, the start of our for loop. We can also have it outside. Now this is up to you, the way that you want to do it. If you want to have an external or an internal, it's up to you. Also with this, we don't actually need the end as well, or the step. We can leave it in here internally, or we can have it external. So we can remove this I++. Okay. Now, when you do this, make sure that you still leave the semicolon. And what we can do is we can do I++ externally. So not inside of the statement. We can have it outside of the statement, and this will work the exact same way. So if we refresh this, you can see it works the exact same way. It's completely up to you, the way that you want to do it. Okay. Now, one other thing that we can do with the for loop is we can have an infinite loop. So you can see here, we are checking for this condition. But let's say that we want to infinitely loop through this for loop. So what we can do is we can remove all of this here. Well, actually not all of this. We just need to remove this condition, and we just need to leave the 2 semicolons. Okay, and this will just loop through this loop endlessly until we actually break out of it. So if you go back here, we refresh this, and you can see that it will not stop looping. It will just continue to loop because we don't actually have any statement here to break out of this loop. But obviously, as you might guess, this is not a very good way of doing it, because this will just continue to loop endlessly without stopping. So what we can do is we can add a break statement in here, okay? So what we can do is, we can do if I is equal to, let's say, 20. Then what all we have to do is break. And this will just break out of the current for loop that we are in. So you can see we are inside of this for loop. So whenever we reach to 20, we will just break out of it. Okay, we will break out of this for loop. Let's save this, let's go back, refresh this, and you can see we go from 0 to 20. And then whenever we reach 20, we will break out of this for loop, and this for loop will no longer continue. We don't have to use this on an infinite loop. We can use this in any loop at all. It does not matter at all. Okay. Now, what else can we do? We can add a continue statement, and a continue statement means it just moves on to the next iteration. Okay. So let's say that we have. I'm not going to use this this type of for loop in this example, the infinite for loop. So let's just create a new one. So let's just do let I is equal to 0. I is smaller than 20, and let's do I plus plus here. So we don't actually need this I plus plus. Now, what we can do is, let's remove this if statement here for now. Now, before the console.log, what we can do is, we can do if, so we'll do if I is equal to 10, for example. Then what we can do is we can do continue. And continue will just move on to the next iteration. So if we refresh this, we are missing a curly bracket at the very end here. Let's add that in. Okay, save that, go back, refresh this, and now observe the logs that we have here. We print out 0 all the way to 9, but you can see we don't actually print 10. And the reason why we don't print 10 is, so if it's any other value, so let's say 1 to 9, because this is false, this will not get executed. This continue statement will not get executed. So then we'll just print out whatever I is. But you can see whenever we reach 10, we will then call this continue statement here. And what continue means is we will ignore the rest of the code inside of our loop, and we will just move on to the next iteration, and we'll start from the very start. So you can see this in action. Whenever we print out 9, okay, and then we iterate it to 10. So now I is equal to 10. So because this is true, we will execute this continue statement. And what this will do is it will ignore the rest of the for loop, and we will start again at the for loop in the next iteration, which is going to be 11. So that's why you can see we have skipped the number 10 over here. Okay, so that's about it for this video on for loops. I hope this video was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.